The encounter. The dense fog clung to the alien forest like a shroud, muffling every sound and distorting every shadow. Commander Ryan Blake tightened his grip on the scanner in his hand, its faint hum the only noise cutting through the oppressive silence. He hadn't meant to stray this far from his ship, the Odyssey, but the unusual energy readings on his device were too strong to ignore. "Just a quick look," he muttered to himself. His voice, though barely above a whisper, seemed unnaturally loud in the stillness. The air felt heavy, and a strange, sweet scent lingered, making his head swim. The trees around him were massive, their trunks shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Their branches twisted together like skeletal hands, creating a canopy that blocked out the twin suns above. It was as if the forest itself didn't want him to leave. Ryan stopped abruptly. His scanner beeped wildly, the readings spiking off the charts. His heart raced. He looked ahead, and there, in the center of a small clearing, was the source, a circle of strange glowing symbols carved into the ground. They pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Curiosity won over caution. Ryan approached slowly, his boots crunching against the soft, mossy ground. The symbols seemed to shift and move as he got closer, like living things trapped in stone. The air grew warmer, and the sweet scent intensified, almost choking him. "What is this place?" he whispered, kneeling to inspect the carvings. He reached out a hand, hesitating as his fingers hovered above one of the symbols. It seemed to call to him, drawing him in like a moth to a flame. Before he could touch it, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the clearing. "Trespasser." Ryan jumped to his feet, spinning around. He saw them emerging from the shadows. Tall, thin figures cloaked in shimmering robes that seemed to blend with the forest itself. Their faces were hidden behind masks of smooth black stone, and their eyes glowed faintly, the same eerie light as the symbols. "Who are you?" Ryan demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. His hand instinctively moved to the laser pistol at his side, but he didn't draw it. Something about these beings told him that a weapon wouldn't help. The tallest of the figures stepped forward, the symbols on the ground glowing brighter with each step. "You have walked where no outsider should tread," it said, its voice resonating as if it spoke directly into Ryan's mind. "I didn't mean any harm," Ryan said quickly. "I was just investigating the energy readings. I'll leave." "Okay." The figure tilted its head, as if considering his words. Then it raised a long, spindly hand and pointed at him. "You cannot leave. Not yet. The ritual has begun." "What ritual?" Ryan asked, panic creeping into his voice. He took a step back, but his foot caught on a root, and he stumbled, falling to the ground. The symbols beneath him flared to life, their light now blinding. The figures began to chant in unison, their voices low and rhythmic. Ryan's head pounded as the symbols burned brighter, their patterns searing into his vision. He tried to stand, but his body wouldn't respond. It felt as if invisible chains were holding him down. "Stop this," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the chant. His skin tingled, then burned, as if fire was crawling beneath it. He looked at his hands and gasped. Strange, glowing markings were spreading across his skin, mirroring the symbols on the ground. "No!" Ryan yelled, struggling against the invisible force. The tallest figure stepped closer, looming over him. "You have been marked," it said. "The curse will bind you to this place until the ritual is complete." "What does that mean?" Ryan demanded, his voice breaking. "What are you doing to me?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it placed a hand on his forehead. Ryan's vision blurred, the world around him spinning as if caught in a vortex. The chanting grew louder, deafening, until it was the only sound he could hear. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. Ryan opened his eyes. The figures were gone, and the clearing was empty. The symbols on the ground had vanished, leaving no trace they had ever been there. He sat up slowly, his body aching and his head pounding. but the markings on his skin were still there, glowing faintly in the dim light. He staggered to his feet, looking around the silent forest. The air was still heavy, the sweet scent still clinging to him. He tried to move, but his legs felt weak, as if the ground itself was pulling him back. "What just happened?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Somewhere in the distance, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the forest. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't natural. It was something else, something watching him. And Ryan knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The curse unfolds. Ryan jolted awake, gasping for air. The ground beneath him felt unnaturally soft, almost as if it was alive, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. He struggled to his feet, every muscle in his body aching. The alien forest around him was silent, eerily so. No wind, no animals, no whispers, just silence. His mind raced as he replayed the encounter in the clearing. The chanting, the glowing symbols, the curse. He glanced down at his hands, and his stomach churned. The markings were still there, glowing faintly in the dim light of the alien suns. They pulsed in sync with his own heartbeat, spreading from his wrists up his arms like veins of light. "What did they do to me?" he muttered, panic creeping into his voice. He pulled his scanner from his belt, but the screen flickered erratically, static replacing the usual data streams. Frustrated, he smacked it against his thigh, but the device remained useless. Whatever energy the shamans had unleashed had fried its circuits. He was on his own now. Ryan tried to move, but his legs felt like lead. Each step was a battle, as if invisible weights were dragging him down. The air around him seemed thicker, resisting his every movement. As he stumbled through the forest, the sweet scent from earlier returned, stronger this time. It filled his nostrils, clinging to his skin like a mist. He reached for his communicator, desperate to contact his ship. "Odyssey, this is Commander Blake. Do you copy?" Static crackled in response. "Odyssey, respond." He tried again, but the only answer was the oppressive silence of the forest. His chest tightened. He was stranded. As he pushed forward, the markings on his skin began to glow brighter, responding to something unseen. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But then the whispers began, soft, unintelligible, and haunting. They came from nowhere and everywhere, weaving through the trees like ghostly tendrils. Ryan spun around, trying to find the source, but there was nothing, just the endless forest. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice echoing unnaturally. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a low guttural growl. Ryan froze. The sound came from somewhere behind him, deep and menacing. Slowly he turned, his heart pounding. In the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes stared back at him. He didn't wait to see what it was. Adrenaline surged through him, and he ran, the heaviness in his legs replaced by sheer terror. Branches whipped at his face, and the forest seemed to shift around him, the trees moving as if alive. The growl grew louder, closer, accompanied by the sound of something large crashing through the underbrush. Ryan tripped over a root and hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his arm, but he scrambled to his feet, ignoring it. The glowing eyes were closer now, and he could make out a shape, tall, hunched, and inhuman. Its breath came in ragged bursts, and its claws gleamed in the faint light. With no time to think, Ryan reached for his pistol and fired. The laser bolt lit up the forest, but the creature dodged with unnatural speed, the beam scorching a tree instead. It let out a deafening roar, and Ryan knew he couldn't outrun it. The markings on his skin flared, brighter than ever, and suddenly the world around him changed. The forest blurred and shifted, the colors warping into strange, swirling patterns. Ryan felt a pull in his chest, like he was being yanked forward by an unseen force. When the world snapped back into focus, he was somewhere else. The air was colder here, the ground harder. Ryan looked around, breathing heavily. He was no longer in the dense forest, but in a vast, open space filled with towering stone pillars. Strange carvings covered the pillars, glowing faintly with the same light as his markings. What is this?" he whispered, his voice echoing in the still air. "You are in the second phase," a voice said behind him. Ryan spun around and saw one of the alien shamans standing a few feet away. This one was smaller than the others, its mask cracked and worn. It carried a staff, its tip glowing with an eerie green light. "The second phase?" Ryan asked, his voice laced with frustration. "What are you talking about? Why are you doing this to me?" The shaman tilted its head, as if amused. "You have been marked by the curse. It binds you to the ritual. Only by completing it can you be free." "What ritual? What do you mean free?" Ryan shouted, stepping toward the shaman. But as he moved, the markings on his skin burned, forcing him to his knees. He gasped in pain, clutching his arms. "The ritual tests your will, your strength, and your mind," the shaman said, its voice calm. "If you survive, the curse will be lifted. If you fail," it didn't finish the sentence, but Ryan understood. Failure meant death. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand despite the pain. "Why me? I didn't ask for this." "You trespassed where no outsider should tread," the shaman said simply. "The forest does not forgive." Before Ryan could respond, the shaman raised its staff, and the markings on his skin flared again. The ground beneath him began to shift, and he felt himself falling, the world spinning into darkness once more. Ryan landed hard, his body aching as he looked around. He was back in the forest, but something was different. The trees were darker, their branches reaching toward him like claws. The whispers had returned, louder this time, filling his mind with fragments of alien words he couldn't understand. And then he realized, the real test had just begun. A shaman's secret. Ryan's head throbbed as he woke in a cold sweat. He was no longer in the forest or the strange stone pillar clearing. The ground beneath him felt metallic, and faint blue light illuminated the space. He blinked, trying to make sense of his surroundings. It was a chamber, circular and lined with strange alien symbols etched into the walls. The symbols pulsed faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the room. His first thought was escape. Every fiber of his being told him he couldn't stay here. As he staggered to his feet, the pain in his arms returned. The glowing markings had spread further, snaking up to his shoulders. They pulsed in sync with the walls, as if feeding off the same source of energy. Before he could take another step, a voice echoed through the chamber. "You shouldn't be awake yet." Ryan spun around, his fists clenched. Standing in the shadows was another shaman, but this one was different. It was smaller, its robes less ornate, and its mask was cracked along one side, revealing pale, almost human-like skin beneath. Its glowing eyes seemed softer, less threatening. "Who are you?" Ryan demanded, his voice hoarse. "Why am I here?" The shaman stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. "You were brought here to complete the ritual," it said. Its voice was quieter than the others he had heard, almost uncertain. "But you've already noticed, haven't you? Something is wrong." "Wrong? You mean besides being cursed and hunted?" Ryan snapped. "What do you want from me?" The shaman tilted its head, studying him. "The curse is not what you think. It binds you, yes, but it also strengthens you. It connects you to this place, to us." Ryan's patience snapped. "I don't want to be connected. I want to leave. You had no right." "I had no choice." The shaman interrupted, its voice sharp now. "None of us do." Ryan froze, caught off guard by the outburst. He took a cautious step back. "What do you mean?" The shaman sighed, its shoulders slumping as if weighed down by a burden. It gestured to the walls around them, where the glowing symbols flared brighter for a moment. "This ritual has been carried out for centuries, long before you or I existed. It is not our will. It is the will of the forest." Ryan frowned. "The forest? What does that mean? It's just trees. The shaman shook its head. The forest is alive, Commander. It is ancient, older than your species. It feeds on energy, and the ritual sustains it. Trespassers like you are. Offerings. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. Offerings. You're sacrificing people. The shaman hesitated. Not all survive, but those who do emerge stronger. The forest keeps its secrets, and it ensures its survival. That's insane, Ryan said, his voice trembling. You're telling me you're just puppets, doing the forest's bidding. The shaman looked at him, and for the first time, Ryan saw something in its glowing eyes. Regret. We were once like you, it said softly. Explorers, travelers. The forest claimed us, and now we serve it. The curse binds us to this place, just as it binds you now. Ryan's mind raced. These shamans weren't born here. They were victims too. So why are you helping it? He asked, anger bubbling beneath his fear. Why not fight back? The shaman laughed bitterly. You think we haven't tried. The forest's power is absolute. Every attempt to resist only strengthens its hold. But you're different. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Different how? The shaman pointed to the markings on his skin. The curse hasn't taken full control of you yet. The forest underestimates your kind. Your will is strong, stronger than it anticipated. That's why I'm risking this. Risking what? Ryan asked, his voice laced with suspicion. The shaman stepped closer, lowering its voice. There is a way to break the curse, but it's dangerous. If the forest discovers what I'm telling you. It didn't finish the sentence, but Ryan understood the stakes. What do I have to do? He asked, his tone serious. The shaman gestured to a panel on the wall, where one of the symbols glowed brighter than the rest. That symbol marks the heart of the forest. It's the source of its power. If you can reach it, you may be able to sever its connection and free yourself. But the path is guarded. The forest will fight you every step of the way. Ryan swallowed hard. And if I fail? The shaman didn't answer immediately. When it finally spoke, its voice was barely audible. Then you'll become one of us. The weight of the revelation hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He looked at the glowing symbol, then back at the shaman. Why are you helping me? He asked. If you've given up, why risk your life for me? The shaman hesitated, then pulled back its hood, revealing more of its face. Its features were gaunt and alien, but there was something unmistakably human about its expression. Because once I was like you, it said. And if there's even a chance that you can succeed, then it's worth it. Ryan nodded, determination hardening in his chest. He didn't trust the shaman completely. But what choice did he have? All right, he said. Tell me what I need to do. The shaman handed him a small, glowing orb. This will guide you to the heart. But once you begin, there's no turning back. Ryan took the orb, its warmth pulsing in his hand. He met the shaman's gaze. I'm not giving up. Not now. The shaman stepped back into the shadows, its form blending with the walls. Good luck, Commander. You'll need it. As Ryan turned toward the glowing symbol, the chamber began to shift and dissolve around him, the forest reclaiming its hold. The whispers returned, louder and more menacing, but he gritted his teeth and pressed forward. The heart of the forest awaited. The trials begin. Ryan stood at the edge of an enormous chasm, the glowing orb in his hand vibrating softly like a heartbeat. The shaman's words echoed in his mind. The forest will fight you every step of the way. He gazed into the abyss, its depths obscured by a swirling, greenish mist. The only path forward was a series of narrow, floating stone platforms that stretched across the void. He tightened his grip on the orb. No turning back, he muttered, stepping onto the first platform. The moment his boot touched it, the markings on his skin flared, and the mist below churned violently. A deep rumble reverberated through the air, as though the forest itself was waking up. Ryan's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but there was nowhere else to go. He stepped onto the next platform, then another. Each time, the rumbling grew louder, and the mist climbed higher, reaching for him like ghostly fingers. Suddenly, the platform beneath him cracked. He froze, heart pounding, as pieces of stone crumbled and fell into the abyss. The mist surged upward, and from its depths emerged shadowy figures, their forms shifting and flickering like smoke. They had no faces, only glowing eyes that locked onto him. One of them lunged. Ryan barely managed to duck, the creature's claw swiping inches from his head. He stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance. The markings on his skin pulsed wildly, sending a wave of heat through his body. Without thinking, he raised his hand, and a burst of light shot from the markings, striking the creature. It shrieked and dissolved into the mist. What the hell was that? Ryan gasped, staring at his glowing hand. He didn't have time to wonder. The other figures were closing in, their movements faster and more aggressive. He leaped to the next platform, then another, the shadow creatures chasing him relentlessly. The orb in his hand grew warmer, its vibrations stronger. Ryan realized it was leading him toward a large glowing symbol etched into the far wall of the chasm. If he could reach it, maybe he could escape this nightmare. He jumped to another platform, but this one tilted under his weight. He slipped, one leg dangling over the edge. The mist surged, and he felt icy tendrils wrapping around his ankle, trying to drag him down. Gritting his teeth, he pulled himself up and fired another burst of light at the mist. The tendrils recoiled, and he scrambled to his feet. The glowing symbol was closer now, its light cutting through the mist. Ryan pushed himself harder, leaping from platform to platform, each one crumbling behind him. The shadow creatures swarmed, but his bursts of light kept them at bay. Finally, he reached the last platform. The glowing symbol loomed above him, etched into the wall like a doorway. The orb in his hand pulsed violently, almost as if urging him forward. Ryan hesitated. Something about the symbol felt alive. The air around it buzzed with energy, and the markings on his skin burned as if in response. He took a deep breath and placed his hand on the symbol. A surge of light engulfed him, and the world shifted. When the light faded, Ryan found himself in a completely different environment. The oppressive chasm and its shadowy creatures were gone, replaced by a serene meadow bathed in golden light. Gentle breezes carried the scent of flowers, and a calm river meandered through the landscape. But Ryan didn't trust it. Nothing about this place felt real. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said behind him. Ryan spun around, his pistol drawn. Standing there was a man. No, something like a man. His features were too perfect, his movements too fluid. His eyes glowed faintly, the same eerie light as the markings on Ryan's skin. "Who are you?" Ryan demanded. The figure smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A guide of sorts. Here to help you through the trial." Ryan didn't lower his weapon. "Help me. That's a first." The guide chuckled. "The forest is testing you, Commander. It's not cruel for the sake of cruelty. It wants to see if you're worthy." "Worthy of what?" "A lifetime of servitude like the shamans." The guide's smile faltered. "That depends on your choices. The meadow you see before you, it's your first challenge, a test of your mind. Somewhere in this place is the truth you seek. But beware, truth often comes at a cost." Ryan's grip on his pistol tightened. "What's the cost?" The guide didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the meadow. "You'll find out soon enough. Good luck, Commander." Before Ryan could say another word, the guide vanished, leaving him alone. The meadow was deceptively peaceful. Ryan moved cautiously, his eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The river sparkled invitingly, and a cluster of trees offered shade, but he didn't trust any of it. As he walked, he noticed something strange. The markings on his skin were reacting to the environment, glowing brighter near certain areas and dimmer near others. It was as if they were guiding him. He followed the markings cues, eventually arriving at a small clearing. In the center was a pedestal, and on it sat an object, a mirror. Its surface shimmered unnaturally, reflecting not the meadow around it, but something else entirely. Ryan approached the mirror warily. As he looked into it, his reflection stared back. But it wasn't him. Not exactly. The figure in the mirror was older, worn, and scarred, with a haunted look in its eyes. "What is this?" Ryan whispered. The reflection spoke. "This is your future." Ryan staggered back. "What?" "This is what you become if you fail," the reflection continued. "Trapped, serving the forest, watching as others suffer the same fate." "No," Ryan said, shaking his head. "That's not going to happen." The reflection leaned closer, its voice cold. "Then fight. Break the curse. But know this, every step you take will cost you a piece of yourself. Are you willing to pay the price?" Ryan clenched his fists. "I'll do whatever it takes." The reflection smirked. "We'll see." The mirror shattered, and the serene meadow dissolved into darkness. Ryan was falling again, the world spinning around him. When he landed, he was back in the forest. The whispers returned, louder than ever, and the markings on his skin burned like fire. But his resolve was stronger now. The trials were far from over, but Ryan knew one thing: he wouldn't let the forest win. A deadly chase. Ryan hit the ground hard, his breath knocked from his lungs. He coughed and rolled onto his back, the taste of iron sharp in his mouth. The sky above him wasn't the same as before. It was a swirling mix of deep purples and blood-red streaks, churning as if alive. He pushed himself to his feet, the strange terrain around him coming into focus. The forest was gone. In its place was a sprawling, desolate wasteland of jagged rocks and shifting sands. The air felt thick, oppressive, and carried the faint sound of something massive moving in the distance. The markings on Ryan's skin pulsed erratically, warning him that this place was far more dangerous than anything he had faced before. "This has to be the next trial," he muttered, gripping the orb tightly. It was glowing faintly now, its light dim and inconsistent, as if struggling to maintain its power. A low, guttural growl rumbled behind him. Ryan froze. Slowly, he turned, his hand instinctively moving to his pistol. A pair of eyes glinted in the distance, glowing like molten gold. They were fixed on him, unblinking. As the creature stepped into the light, Ryan's stomach twisted. It was massive, at least twice his height, with a sinewy, muscular frame. Its skin was black and glistened as if coated in oil, and its jagged claws scraped the ground with each step. But its most unsettling feature was its face. There wasn't one. Where its eyes and mouth should have been, there was only a smooth, featureless surface. Ryan's pulse quickened. The creature tilted its head, as if studying him, then let out a soundless roar. The force of it hit Ryan like a physical blow, sending him stumbling backward. "Great," he muttered. "Another day, another nightmare." The creature lunged. Ryan barely managed to dive out of the way, rolling across the rocky ground as the beast's claws tore through the air where he had stood. He scrambled to his feet and fired his pistol. The laser bolt struck the creature's chest, but instead of injuring it, the energy was absorbed into its body. The glow in its eyes flared brighter, and it roared again. "Of course that didn't work," Ryan said through gritted teeth, already running. He had no plan, no clear direction. All he knew was that staying still meant death. The wasteland was a treacherous maze of sharp rocks and unstable ground. Ryan weaved between jagged formations, his boots skidding on loose gravel. The creature was relentless, smashing through obstacles with ease. Each step it took sent tremors through the ground, making it harder for Ryan to keep his footing. His breath came in ragged gasps, his muscles burning. The orb in his hand vibrated more urgently, its light flickering toward a narrow crevice in the distance. It was guiding him again. "Better be leading me to safety," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder. The creature was gaining on him, its massive form barreling through the wasteland like an unstoppable force. Ryan reached the crevice and squeezed through, the jagged edges tearing at his suit. The space was tight, barely wide enough for him to move, but it slowed the creature down. He could hear it clawing at the rocks, trying to force its way through. He emerged on the other side into a small open area. In the center stood a towering obelisk, its surface covered in glowing symbols that matched the markings on his skin. The orb in his hand grew hot, its light steady and strong. "That's it," he said, his voice filled with determination. He sprinted toward the obelisk, but the creature was already climbing over the rocks behind him. Its speed was terrifying, and Ryan knew he wouldn't reach the obelisk in time. Thinking fast, he turned and raised his glowing hand. The markings on his skin burned as he focused, and a surge of energy shot out, striking the creature in the chest. It stumbled, momentarily disoriented, but it wasn't enough to stop it. Ryan cursed under his breath and ran for the obelisk. The creature recovered quickly, letting out another soundless roar as it closed the distance. Ryan reached the base of the obelisk and pressed the orb into a small, circular indentation on its surface. The reaction was immediate. The obelisk flared to life, its symbols blazing with light. A shockwave of energy erupted from its core, sending Ryan flying backward. The creature, caught in the blast, let out a guttural screech as its body disintegrated into black smoke. Ryan landed hard, groaning in pain. He sat up slowly, his vision swimming, and looked at the obelisk. Its light was fading now, the symbols dimming until they were no longer visible. The orb, now cracked and lifeless, fell to the ground. "Another trial down," he muttered, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "How many more of these do I have to go through?" The ground beneath him began to tremble. He scrambled to his feet, expecting another attack. But instead, the terrain shifted and dissolved, the wasteland collapsing into itself. Ryan felt weightless for a moment, and then he was falling again. When he landed, it was back in the forest. But something was different. The trees were darker, their branches twisted and reaching. The air was heavy with whispers, louder now, and more coherent. Ryan could almost make out words, though they weren't in any language he recognized. He pushed himself up, his body aching, and looked at his arms. The markings had spread further, now covering his chest and neck. They glowed faintly, pulsating in rhythm with the whispers. "This isn't over," he said, his voice firm. He didn't know what the forest had planned next, but one thing was clear. It wouldn't stop until it broke him, and he wasn't going to let it. Betrayal among allies. The forest was silent, but it was a deceptive silence, heavy with tension and unseen dangers. Ryan staggered through the dense underbrush, his body bruised and battered from the previous trials. The glowing markings on his skin had spread further, now wrapping around his neck and creeping toward his face. They pulsed faintly, an unrelenting reminder of the curse that clung to him like a second skin. He clutched the cracked orb in his hand, its light now completely extinguished. It had guided him through so much, but now it was nothing more than a useless fragment. He wanted to throw it away, but hesitated. Something told him it still mattered. "Keep moving," he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse. The whispers in the air had grown louder, almost intelligible now, like fragments of a forgotten language clawing at the edges of his mind. Each step felt heavier, not just from exhaustion, but from the oppressive weight of the forest's will pressing down on him. As he pushed through the thick foliage, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Ryan's hand instinctively went to his pistol, but he stopped when he recognized the cracked mask and tattered robes. It was the shaman who had helped him before. "You," Ryan said, his voice tinged with both relief and suspicion. "What are you doing here?" The shaman tilted its head, its glowing eyes scanning him. "You've survived the trials so far. Impressive. Few make it this far." Ryan didn't lower his guard. "I'm not here to impress anyone. I just want to end this curse and leave." The shaman stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. And you're close, Commander. The heart of the forest is near. But the final trial will not be like the others. Ryan crossed his arms, his patience wearing thin. What's the catch this time? Another monster. More illusions. The shaman hesitated, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. The forest will not send its creatures or visions this time. It will test you, against yourself. Ryan frowned. What does that mean? The shaman didn't answer. Instead, it extended a long, spindly hand, holding a small vial filled with a shimmering, golden liquid. Drink this. Ryan stared at the vial, his instincts screaming that this was a trap. What is it? A key, the shaman replied cryptically. It will allow you to enter the heart of the forest. Without it, you won't survive. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Why are you helping me? What do you gain from this? The shaman was silent for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. Because your success could mean my freedom. The forest's grip binds us all. If you break it, perhaps I too can be free. Ryan studied the shaman's face, or what little he could see of it. The desperation in its voice sounded real, but he'd been deceived before. How do I know I can trust you? The shaman's glowing eyes met his. You don't. Ryan sighed, weighing his options. He was out of time and out of choices. Grudgingly, he took the vial and uncorked it. The liquid inside shimmered like molten gold, its surface rippling as if alive. This better not kill me, he muttered, then downed the contents in one gulp. The effect was immediate. The world around him blurred and twisted, the trees melting into shadows, and the ground dissolving beneath his feet. His vision swam, and a searing pain shot through his body, as if the markings on his skin were burning into his very soul. When the pain subsided, Ryan found himself standing in a vast, open space. The forest was gone, replaced by an endless void filled with swirling lights. In the center of the void was a massive, pulsating orb, its surface shifting and alive. It was the heart of the forest. You've made it, the shaman's voice said, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. But the forest knows you are here. It will not let you destroy it without a fight. Ryan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the heart. The markings on his skin burned brighter, reacting to the orb's energy. He raised his pistol, but before he could fire, the ground beneath him shifted. From the shadows emerged another figure, one that made Ryan's blood run cold. It was him. The doppelganger stepped into the light, identical in every way. Its markings glowed with the same intensity, and it held a pistol aimed directly at him. Its eyes, however, were empty, void of emotion. What is this? Ryan demanded, his voice echoing in the void. The shaman's voice returned, softer now. The final trial. To destroy the heart, you must face yourself. The doppelganger didn't wait for an invitation. It fired first, the laser bolt narrowly missing Ryan's shoulder. Ryan dove to the side, rolling to his feet and returning fire. The doppelganger moved with unsettling precision, matching Ryan's every move. This is insane, Ryan shouted, dodging another shot. How do I beat it? You must understand it, the shaman replied cryptically. It is not your enemy. It is a reflection. Ryan didn't have time for riddles. The doppelganger closed the distance, slamming into him with brutal force. They tumbled to the ground, grappling for control. Ryan's fist connected with the doppelganger's face, but it didn't flinch. Its strength was inhuman, its movements mechanical. As they fought, Ryan's mind raced. The shaman's words echoed in his head. A reflection, not your enemy. It hit him. The doppelganger wasn't just mimicking him, it was responding to his aggression. Every attack he made, it countered perfectly, as if it knew his every thought. He stopped fighting. The doppelganger froze, its glowing eyes staring into his. Ryan raised his hands, palms open. I'm not going to fight you. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the doppelganger lowered its weapon. Its form began to dissolve, the glowing markings fading as it merged with the swirling light of the void. The heart of the forest pulsed violently, as if in pain. Ryan turned back to it, his markings now glowing brighter than ever. He raised his hand, the energy within him surging to a crescendo. "This ends now," he said, unleashing the energy in a blinding wave. The heart exploded in a burst of light, and the world around him shattered. When Ryan opened his eyes, he was back in the forest. The markings on his skin were gone, and the air felt lighter, free of the oppressive weight that had suffocated it before. The shaman stood nearby, its cracked mask glowing faintly. "You did it," it said, its voice filled with awe. "The forest is free. And so am I." Ryan nodded, too exhausted to speak. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt truly free. But deep down, he knew the cost of his victory would stay with him forever. Breaking the curse. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Ryan stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the shattered remnants of the heart of the forest. The once overwhelming glow of its energy was gone, replaced by a faint, eerie hum that vibrated through the air. The ground beneath his feet felt unstable, as if the very fabric of the forest was unraveling. He clenched his fists, glancing at the faint remnants of the markings on his skin. They were almost gone now, flickering weakly, but they still tethered him to this place. His chest tightened as the realization sank in. Destroying the heart hadn't completely freed him. Not yet. From behind him came the soft rustle of movement. Ryan turned quickly, his hand going to his pistol. Emerging from the shadows was the shaman, its cracked mask glinting in the dim light. "You've done it," the shaman said, its voice filled with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. "The heart is destroyed. The forest is dying." Ryan stepped closer, his tone sharp. "Then why am I still here? Why isn't this curse gone?" The shaman hesitated, lowering its gaze. "The curse is not tied only to the heart. It is tied to you, to your will. The final choice is yours." Ryan's jaw tightened. "What choice?" The shaman gestured toward the clearing, where the shattered remnants of the heart began to pulse faintly, as if clinging to life. "You can sever your connection completely and leave this place, but doing so will destroy what remains of the forest. Everything here, every creature, every fragment of life, will cease to exist." Ryan's heart sank. "And the other option?" The shaman stepped closer, its glowing eyes fixed on him. "You stay. Become the new guardian. The forest would live, and its balance would be restored, but you would never leave." Ryan felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He turned away, staring at the dying heart, his mind racing. After everything he'd been through, the trials, the pain, the betrayal, he was now faced with an impossible decision. Save himself or save the forest. "You can't ask me to do this," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't ask for any of this." The shaman's voice softened. "None of us did, but the forest chose you for a reason. It saw something in you, your strength, your will. You are the only one who can decide its fate." Ryan closed his eyes, his mind replaying every moment he had endured since stumbling into the forest. The creatures, the trials, the endless fight for survival. He thought about the shaman and the others like it, trapped in servitude for centuries. And he thought about himself, the life he had left behind, the people who might still be waiting for him. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The shaman stepped beside him, placing a spindly hand on his shoulder. "There is no right or wrong choice, Commander. Only what you can live with." Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes opening as he turned to face the heart. The pulsing remnants seemed to call to him, faintly, almost pleading. He felt the weight of the forest pressing down on him, but also the weight of his own freedom tugging in the opposite direction. He took a step forward, his boots crunching against the brittle ground. The glowing remnants of the heart flared weakly as he approached, their light reflecting in his eyes. He raised his hand, the last vestiges of the markings on his skin burning faintly as they reacted to the energy. "I never wanted to be a part of this," he said, his voice steady now. "But maybe I was meant to be." The shaman watched silently as Ryan placed his hand on the shattered remains of the heart. The moment his skin touched the glowing fragments, a surge of energy rippled through him, stronger than anything he had felt before. The markings on his body flared one final time, then vanished completely. The forest came alive. The ground beneath him solidified. The air grew warmer, and the whispers faded into a gentle hum. The trees that had withered began to grow again, their branches stretching toward the sky. The oppressive weight that had hung over the forest lifted, replaced by a calm, peaceful stillness. But Ryan felt himself changing too. His body grew lighter, less substantial, as if he was dissolving into the very fabric of the forest. His vision blurred, and for a moment he saw himself, not as a man, but as something more. A guardian, a part of the forest's endless cycle. The shaman stepped forward, bowing its head. "Thank you, Commander. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." Ryan smiled faintly, his voice echoing softly as his form began to fade. "Take care of it." And then he was gone. Epilogue. The forest thrived once more, its ancient energy restored. The shamans, freed from their curse, scattered to the far reaches of the galaxy, carrying with them the story of the one who had saved them all. Deep within the heart of the forest, where the shattered remnants of the old heart once lay, a new light pulsed faintly. It was neither menacing nor oppressive. It was warm, steady, and alive. And if one listened closely, they might hear a voice, gentle and resolute, whispering through the trees, "I'm still here."